And there's so much disinformation coming out about these crazy court cases that he keeps doing and what's happening in Michigan right now. I mean, it feels like they're attempting a coup to me, Sonny. I know everybody doesn't want to hear that, but that's what dictators do when they try to say this election isn't real. This didn't happen. I'm going to change it.
Zero self-awareness from Democrats and liberals here about the allegations, the charges they make. Zero self-awareness about this. None. Let's start with this. Dictators do not go to court. It's not what they do. Dictators just tell the military, hey, go round up my opposition, lock them up, and I am El Presidente forever, right? That's what dictators do. So this notion that having a legal team present arguments before a judge, what's happened? They have a cognitive dissonance here. They have contradictions in the very allegations they make. What is the, when you look at this, they keep saying that these court cases are being laughed out of court, but then they also say that this is a horrible threat to democracy. Well, if they're being laughed out of court, if the judges are saying, no, you guys don't prevail on this particular case, which has happened in some instances, they're not actually being laughed out of court, but they have not been successful in some of these court cases. And if the Trump legal team's response is, okay, well, we're going to appeal that, and maybe we'll come and bring another case before the judge. That's called the system. That's called the process. There's nothing about that that's troubling, that undermines it, that's dangerous. Just not true. They can keep saying this stuff all day, but it's just not true. Okay. But they can't help themselves. And then also, they really think that we're going to forget about what happened in 2016. They really believe that we're not going to remember all the psycho libs running around acting like Trump was taking orders from Vladimir Putin. You know I'm not exaggerating. That the Kremlin was the puppet master for Donald Trump, that he was a Manchurian candidate for Russia, that this is a time where we had a foreign asset, and you had former CIA directors saying this kind of stuff on, of course, CNN and MSNBC in these places. You had people that we were all supposed to listen to and take seriously. We had the entirety of the mainstream liberal press believing that the president colluded with Russia, was part of some evil plot. And was there evidence for this? Was it true? No. No, there was not. It was not true. Have they ever admitted this? Have they ever come forward and said, you know what? We probably shouldn't have been running around pretending that that's really what was going on. We probably should have been a little bit more honest with our audiences, with the people that were. No. And are they ever going to do that? No, they are not. But we remember that they were full of lies during the Russia collusion nonsense, and that they did not accept the results of the 2016 election. And it wasn't just in rhetorical terms. They did try a coup to use fake evidence and use the security apparatus, use the deep state, which is what they did. The deep state in Turkey is responsible for many coups, right? The Derin Devlet. This is what people think of often as they think of it as the original concept of a deep state. There is this military industrial complex of sorts in Turkey that will just step in and say, sorry, this election result will not stand, or, we're the government now. And they've done it many, many times over the course of the 20th century. That's what a coup looks like. And a coup in the context of Trump, the attempted coup, was that there were deep state individuals, Comey, Strzok, Page, Brennan, Clapper. There were people from within the security apparatus who were Democrats and who were partisans who didn't accept the 2016 election and then used fake evidence. This is all a matter of fact now. Used fake evidence, the dossier, which was a joke and all full of bull. Remember the golden showers? I mean, it was just preposterous, the whole thing. They used that and then media pressure to get an investigation going. The purpose of the investigation was to remove the president from office. Well, when you have a fake investigation, an investigation based on fake evidence, knowingly fake evidence, and you use that as an excuse to bring a Soviet-style political persecution prosecution, that's a coup. So they tried a coup in 2016, and it didn't work. And now they're telling us that Trump bringing legal challenges and saying that he wants to make it clear that there was fraud going on here, that's a coup. There was fraud. We all know that. It's just a question of how much and how much can we prove. Those are the outstanding questions. That's what still remains. But no, we have to be told constantly that the president is a threat to our sacred democracy. Oh my gosh. And he's just not genteel enough when he deals with these libs. Play 8.
One thing, though, that I believe doesn't deserve a word more, and I don't get what my brothers and sisters in the media keep playing to this. Who cares if Trump concedes? It's not in the law. It's a tradition that gives a nod to decency and disagreement. He's never been about that. He's never been about anything but his own selfish interests, and you know it. Why give him another chance to lie about the election or anything else or everything else? He isn't going to tell his followers to do anything but give him more money for a lost cause and use it maybe even on something else. Less is more from Trump, and I hope you all know that.
Do you think that he will go on air and apologize for this statement if and when Trump does concede? Do you think that if we get into December or January and the president gives an official statement, he says, I still believe there was fraud, but I will concede that the election results are what they are, which is possible, folks. I'm telling you the truth. There's this is actually probable. All right. Let's all be honest about this. We are the reality people. We're not the, living in a delusion, Russia collusion people. We're the what's actually happening. That's what, conservatism at its core has to be rooted in what is true and what's really going on. They're certifying states now. This process is moving along, and we have not seen the knockout punch or even anything close to it from the Trump legal team that could turn this thing around. It could happen. It has not happened. I always tell you that I will speak the truth to you, and I have to on this issue, and I think you all know it has not happened yet, and it may not happen. In which case, Joe Biden will be the president of the United States. But there's also an upside to this, something I hope you all remember. I hope that we all can rally around here. And even some of the libs on the left are aware of it. They're understanding it at some level. That Trumpism, as I have told you, in fact, I wrote an editorial on bucksexton.com weeks ago about this. And you should all check out bucksexton.com if you have not already today. Trumpism is absolutely here to stay. Play 3.
Well, I think Trumpism is here to stay, quite frankly. Like you said, Whoopi and Joy, over 70 million people voted for him, in spite of the fact that they knew that he was racist and misogynist, transphobic, homophobic, and so they voted for him anyway. It just seems to me that people's hearts and minds don't change that quickly. And if we stop talking about President Trump, then, I'm always fearful that past becomes prologue, right? When you forget about the past, it can happen again and again and again. And I do think that we're seeing someone that is trying to avenge Joe Biden's election, someone who is a bankrupt when it comes to morality. And, the bottom line is this could happen again. Someone else could be voted into the presidency that is not as crass as President Trump, that sort of is a little smoother around the edges if we forget who this person was in office for 4 years.
Now, there's all the usual, Trump's a racist, he's awful, he's a misogynist, all that stuff. Right, he's a racist who got more votes from black and Latino voters in this last election than he did after being president for 4 years, and then Republicans generally do in presidential elections. But Trumpism is here to stay. That's reality. The Trump movement isn't going anywhere. So I'm glad to see that libs are recognizing this, because otherwise they're going to have some kind of a meltdown when they see that America first and the principles, the ideas that Donald Trump represented, secure borders, better trade deals, looking at American interests as separate and distinct from the interests of the global community, calling out the losers and mediocrities who run the swamp for their own benefit, pretending to care about people when they don't give a damn about them. That's not going anywhere. And I also think that Trump is going to be running effectively a Trump movement largely from Mar-a-Lago. And this is, again, assuming that we don't have that legal turnabout that could still happen. So there we have it, friends. I recently got a crash course in home title theft, and you better pray this crime never happens to you because it goes after your most valuable asset, your home. Here's how it works. The bad guys, cyber thieves, they find your home's title online, then they use a quitclaim deed to kick you off, put themselves on, and then they start taking out loans against your home's title. You often won't find out about this until you receive payment notices in the mail or perhaps even a foreclosure notice. You have to go with the experts I trust at Home Title Lock. Just go to HomeTitleLock.com. Use the promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. You can also check online to see if you're a victim of this crime and don't even know it. That's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. And you can check online to see if you're a victim of this crime and don't even know it yet. Remember, your home's title is online. It's stored on servers. It's up in the cloud. The bad guys are targeting it. Try to get protection today. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code RADIO, 30 free days of protection.
I certainly would support investigating the President of the United States. What he has done in the 4 years that he has served as president is simply unconscionable. I think criminal in some cases. He's placed this country in danger. And the President of the United States is supposed to be about making sure that the country is safe and secure. And he has done everything possible to undermine our democracy. And I don't think that can be overlooked. And I don't know what Biden would do. And I know that Biden wants to move on. He does not want to be bogged down in investigations. But I think that the President of the United States should be investigated. And we should send a message across the world that we will not tolerate the undermining of our democracy in the way that this president has done.
This is Congresswoman Maxine Waters vocalizing the thoughts that many, many Democrats share, which is that it would not even be enough for Trump to leave. It's not even enough if Trump loses, he's done, he's finished. They want retribution. They want to get him. And there's so many levels you can look at this on where it's clearly insane. It's clearly crazy. There's so many. But I would just say this first and foremost. They've investigated him for 4 years. They've thrown so much at Trump to investigate him. They had the Russia collusion probe, and they had impeachment and more witnesses, and the Congress running that, and they've had the Southern District of New York, and they've had the District Attorney of Manhattan, and they've had all these investigations. They're investigating the Trump campaign for Russia collusion. They're investigating the Trump Foundation for tax fraud. All they've done is investigate this guy for 4 years with everything they've got, every tool at their disposal. They leaked his tax returns because they couldn't get them through other processes, right? So all they've done is harass this guy with whatever BS investigations they possibly could. And now you've got a member of Congress, and she's not the only one. There are many others who are going to want to go after him when he leaves. Now, I'm going to tell you this right now. I don't think that they're going to sick the DOJ on Trump like an attack dog. I don't think they're going to do that. What I do think will happen is that they'll allow it to occur at a lesser level of government. Now that's not to say that there's no real risk here for the Trumps. When I say lesser level, I just mean further down the federal government. So you'll have the district attorney, Cy Vance in New York, will look at the Trump organization, and I think they will investigate them. But they're going to try to take it away from the DOJ level, at least initially, and go lower down. So it seems like it's not coming from the Biden administration. But I'm going to tell you this right now. These people play hardball. Remember this, Dinesh D'Souza, who is honestly he's one of the conservatives that I used to read when I was, a young guy coming up in the ranks and right college and right after. Dinesh D'Souza, who I've had on the show many times, and he's a friend of the show, he was treated differently for a completely, to say it's nonviolent is even an exaggeration. He gave $15,000 to a congressional candidate who was sure to lose, but he doubled up essentially. I think he gave two $15,000 contributions. He wasn't supposed to do that. Usually you pay a fine and you're told, don't do anything else illegal for a year and, we'll just let this go. They made him go to a halfway house. They wanted to send him to federal prison over that. And that was the Obama DOJ, and that was acting through Preet Bharara, who was one of Obama's little henchmen. And that's the way that they treat their political opponents. They use the law as a weapon. So while I'm telling you that I don't think the DOJ is going to immediately, because they want it to be a little bit more subtle. They want it to be a little bit more plausible deniability, at least at first. But they are going to investigate people. Maxine Waters is just saying what a lot of them are smart enough not to say out loud at this point in Congress and, other Democrats. But what she's saying is a sentiment that they broadly share, which is that they want to see punishment. They want vengeance against Trump and against his supporters. I think you're going to see IRS investigations of people who were very vocal allies of Trump. I think you're going to see deterrence, extremely harsh deterrence prosecutions of anyone around Trump for very minor things. And they'll tell us, they'll be gaslighting us. They'll say, oh, sorry, no, this has nothing to do with the fact that, we're not going after Corey Lewandowski, or we're not going after Steve Bannon, or we're not going because of their association with Trump. We're going after them because, they broke the law in some serious way. And we'll all say, really? Just that's the we've seen what they did to Roger Stone. We've seen what they were willing to do in a kind of court of public opinion to Brett Kavanaugh. They try to ruin and destroy people. So one thing that we do need to be prepared for is that even if they get their wish, there's going to be there's no outreach. There's no real call for unity. There's no willingness to be better than they've been in the Trump era. The left is going to be out for scalps. They're going to be out to make examples of people. And you may have this cabal of the swamp at the top with Biden and other people from the Obama administration, that people like Blinken and Kerry, who are just mediocrities who seem relatively innocuous. But it's going to be, whoever's running the civil rights division at the DOJ, it's going to be a U.S. attorney for the Southern District or for the Eastern District of Virginia. And it's going to be those players in this who, without even having to be told by the mafia boss, in this case Biden, know who has to be made an example of, know who needs to be punished in a Biden era. So I'm telling you this now because I think we're going to have to revisit this. Just give it time. Think of all the criminal prosecutions of Republicans that were effectively show trials, if they got to the trial phase, or that were just investigations where the process was the punishment. Rick Perry, Chris Christie, Ted Stevens, the guy, what's his name? The governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker. You just go, there's a whole list. I can't even think of them off the top of my head. And of course, Trump at the very top of the list with Russia collusion. So get ready for lawfare from the Biden regime, but look for it to be a little bit cloaked, a little bit insidious.
I think they're all outstanding. What really stands out to me, Brianna, is the fact
is that you're not seeing grifters, you're not seeing unqualified con artists, you're not seeing people who are, as far as we know, under investigation by the FBI. I mean, it just makes you realize all of the misfits that Donald Trump appointed to office, and by comparison, Trump really had the Z team. This is really the A team. I mean, it's really striking to me from Tony Blinken on down. They are all incredibly qualified with decades of experience, deep knowledge of foreign policy, deep commitment to American leadership, and just as importantly, they also know Joe Biden. They've worked with him for a long time, and that's going to be a key advantage because there is going to be a trust and confidence in that team that you don't see amid the backbiting of the Trump administration.
That's Republican turncoat, so former Republican, turned Democrat, Max Boot, who's never seen a war he didn't like for other people to fight. And now he's talking about how great the Biden foreign policy team will be. I want to bring somebody in who is going to shake it up by dropping some truth bombs here about what the establishment foreign policy team would be under Biden, but also just more generally, it seems like they want us to forget the lessons we've learned under 4 years of Trump about what does work. We got our friend Harsanyi with us now, David Harsanyi of National Review, where he's a senior writer. David, great to have you.
Always great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the named people before we get into the philosophy of a would-be Biden foreign policy. And I think this is an area where there's a lot of bipartisan crossover in terms of what's wrong. But let's start with who he's named and what your thoughts are about the people that Max Boot, clearly not the A team, is calling the A team.
Yeah. I mean, I love that Max Boot says that was the Z team, the team that brought or helped at least, bring about 4 or 5 potential peace deals in the Middle East that he would be raving about if it had been Obama or if it had been Biden, or would be Biden. Anthony Blinken or Tony Blinken, who I think you mentioned, has the perfect swamp resume. I think he went to an Ivy League school. He worked for Clinton. He worked for Obama. He was a lobbyist. He was, on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee when Democrats ran it, I believe, and has literally been wrong about every single issue by the standards that he himself set. Wrong on Russia when he was mocking Mitt Romney and all of that was going on. By his own, I don't know that the reset's a bad idea with Russia, but that's his own words. Wrong on Syria, where he wants more troops. Wrong on Iraq, where he was part of the decision-making that went into going to Iraq for Joe Biden. Wrong on Israel and the Middle East in a huge way. Biden, Kerry, all these people who have been around forever say that there couldn't be any peace if we didn't first go through the Palestinians. And even the Arab League and even the Gulf states, the Sunni Gulf states, are now abandoning the PLO and Hamas and moving forward, making peace with Israel. Now, whether you think it's a good deal or not, that's a separate story. Well, what it does show is that Biden's team, these professionals that are not the Z team but the A team and deeply steeped in all the theories and understanding of the Middle East, were wrong about everything. And yet they get to run everything, and no one ever questions no one ever questions them simply because it's credentialism. They have all the right credentials.
David, I've worked as a research associate, a research intern at a number of foreign policy think tanks in my formative years, and then was at the CIA, which is kind of like the government's little secret foreign policy think tank, right? But a lot of you get this people come in with the same kinds of credentials. You go to these international relations schools and everything, which is one of the reasons why the CIA and the intelligence community is actually so full of leftists, because they tend to self-select for other people that, went to, Harvard or Columbia, and they do these international relations schools where they really don't learn very much, by the way. It's really just indoctrination into the BBC, NPR view of global foreign policy. I mean, that's what you actually learn in those places. But you're right, and I think this is important for everyone to think about now. We were told that Trump foreign policy, because he didn't have experience in that arena, and the people he brought in were somewhat non-traditional. I mean, some of them were people that have worked in this in the past. Trump's foreign policy has been mostly successes. He did not get a deal with North Korea, so let's just get that out of the way. And he tried, and sometimes I think the stuff he said was a little weird about Kim Jong-un, but still. But in terms of wars, disasters, terrible stuff happening in a foreign policy sense. How can we view the Trump foreign policy as anything other than extremely improved upon based on what we have with the Obama foreign policy?
Right. I forgot to mention Libya, where we went in basically for the Europeans to try, which was a disaster as well, which Barack Obama in his autobiography said was a disaster. And he says that it was Biden's team and Blinken who were part of the strong voices convincing him to do it, because he never takes credit for anything he does wrong, of course. But and he didn't go to Congress, by the way, to do it. And that's another aspect of this I just will quickly mention. When I read all these stories about how America's back, it's all about Europe, right? It's all very Eurocentric. The world is a big place. We have a lot of other places to deal with and a lot of other allies around the world. But yet doing what France and Germany want us to do seems to be really what they're talking about, like going into Libya, like joining the Paris Accords, which will be ratified by the European Union, but not by the United States Senate, where it should be if it's a real treaty. But of course, the media will say nothing. I already see all the same folks, celebrating how we're going to be, back out there doing what we've done for 35 years. Never once saying, we haven't been in a war during this last 4 years, that wasn't started earlier. No one really.
And by the way, just to follow up on that, we're speaking to David Harsanyi of National Review. You should read his latest at nationalreview.com. Look for David's pieces every week there. David, we not only did we not have a war, we didn't really dramatically escalate, except in the one case where it wasn't even really a troop escalation so much as a change of the rules of engagement in Syria, which is often left out of this. And it was early in the Trump administration, but Trump essentially said, let's let the guys in the field make the calls they need to defeat ISIS. They mopped up ISIS in weeks. People forget that there was going to be this street-to-street fighting in Raqqa, and oh my gosh, and we're going to be stuck there forever. Trump managed to roll them up, much more effective airstrikes, put embedded soldiers with the Kurds, beat back the Islamic State, and then didn't escalate 100,000 troops in Afghanistan just to look tough, which is what Obama did, with no real plan to win that war. And this isn't even brought up. I mean, the anti-war left to me is a joke, because the anti-war left only exists when there's a Republican to attack.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Now, listen, obviously sometimes there is no right answer. There is no right or wrong when you're dealing with Syria. There is better and worse, I would say, right? So we do the best we can, and then we think about whether we want to be involved or not, or why we're involved and things like that. Very complicated situation, clearly. But let's talk about Iran, where when Trump got out of the Iran deal, people like Tony Blinken and others immediately said that they were going to make a rush towards nuclear weapons, that war was now inevitable. And they did challenge American resolve a bit. And I think Trump both at the same time showed that we were pretty tough, but also held back from, if you remember, bombing them when he heard about what the casualties might look like. But I think Iran learned their lesson. And then he killed Soleimani and so forth, who is a terrorist, who I just don't think Obama would have taken him out.
It was amazing to me that the media really tried to make this whole case. I remember the Soleimani thing very clearly. I was working the CIA's Iraq desk when Soleimani was, he was orchestrating, ambushes targeted at U.S. soldiers with EFPs to maim and kill our troops. And remember, Soleimani was not at war with us, right? He was just killing Americans in a country that wasn't Iran because he thought it was good for Iranian interests and he felt like it. And we took that guy out, and the media was apoplectic. I mean, they were screaming hair on fire about the war that was coming with Iran because of this. No, there was no war. We just killed a terrorist that murdered on his order. He was like the mafia boss that called for assassinations of U.S. troops. We took him out. No consequences.
They fired some rockets just as a show of internal domestic.
But they fired some.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And also the fact was that Soleimani was probably responsible for 500 to 600 American deaths. That's an Obama administration Pentagon estimate, not something Trump came up with. And he was a killer of Americans. And the only reason we didn't go after guys like that, who was freely driving around Iraq like nothing was wrong, during the Obama administration, and apparently didn't realize he had to stop doing it during the Trump administration, was because the Iran deal was everything to a lot of these ideologues in the Obama administration. So I have to quickly say, I'm happy that we have sort of failed swamp creatures there instead of ideologues like Ben Rhodes. though there's still time, of course, for him to be part of the administration, or maybe even Susan Rice or Chris Murphy or someone like that. But, we shouldn't forget still that these people were wrong about Iran. They were wrong about moving the embassy to Jerusalem. They're wrong about everything. And we keep acting because of their credentials like they have a level of professionalism that isn't there. I wrote a column on this, but if you or I were as bad at our jobs, now thank God I don't have a serious job like, he does. But if we were as wrong at our jobs, we wouldn't have a job. And in DC, you get to run things.
Yeah,
the only guy who's worse than Blinken is Biden, right? Biden has been more wrong than even Tony Blinken in his history, and he's the president now. So anyway, I just think that Trump blew up a lot of the conventional norms that were ossified in DC, that people thought, this is the only way to move forward, and they were clearly wrong on Israel, on Iran, on many other issues. And I don't say, obviously North Korea is a tough thing, and other, he hasn't been great on every single issue, but just in general, I mean, his whole attitude of not being Eurocentric about everything.
Why is it that the elites in this country, I mean, especially if you're a journo at a major news publication or one of the left-leaning cable news channels out there, whatever the French, the Germans, and the English think, we're all supposed to really care. They'll share polls about like our presidential election, about who do the French support? And I sit here, or who do the Brits even support? I say, we're pretty sure we fought a war, so we don't ever have to care about what they think of our leadership. Why are they so obsessed with this? Is it just this cultural affinity they have for how fancy and better than us the Europeans are? They're really not. I mean, I always like to tell people, you guys want to see racism? Go into some European countries and see how they deal with ethnic minorities. But anyway, David, go ahead.
I'm really happy you mentioned all that, because I actually am writing a book now that'll come out next year on that very topic, about how our elites, our journalists, our politicians are always looking to Europe, despite the fact that we do everything. And I mean everything from racism to assimilation, to economics, to healthcare better than they do, by any standard. I think they look there because they think those folks are more sophisticated than we are. When you read about Blinken, I keep mentioning him because I think he's probably the worst of the lot, but when you read about our next Secretary of State, in The Guardian, they talk about how he plays soccer and how he is bilingual and how he goes to Europe and how he went to school in Paris and all these things, while Pompeo and others are always on conservative talk radio in Iowa and places that don't matter, right? France matters, Brussels matters, Des Moines does not matter to people who work at the Brookings Institute or work at the UN, or et cetera. I think that this might bite them. I think that Americans are pretty happy with the foreign policy we had in the last 4 years. I think they're happy about a less belligerent outlook and hawkish outlook on the world. And we'll see how that shakes out politically.
David Harsanyi, everybody, check out his latest at nationalreview.com and follow him on Twitter if you're on Twitter. David, Harsanyi time is always fun. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
There will be no separate peace between Israel and the Arab world. I want to make that very clear to all of you. I've heard several prominent politicians in Israel sometimes saying, well, the Arab world's in a different place now. We just have to reach out to them and we can work some things with the Arab world and we'll deal with the Palestinians. No, 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 and no. I can tell you that, reaffirmed even in the last week as I have talked to leaders of the Arab community. There will be no advance and separate peace with the Arab world without the Palestinian process and Palestinian peace. Everybody needs to understand that. That is a hard reality.
That is total bull, but that was John Kerry back in 2016. And notice that he is just a stupid person's version of what an intelligent, authoritative person sounds like, right? There will be no peace with the Palestinians separate and apart from the, this whole thing. Well, he was wrong, but he presents this not even as his assessment or his opinion. He says this is established reality. He was wrong. And that was in 2016. And you know who proved him wrong? The Trump administration that has managed to negotiate peace deals with Gulf Arab states and Israel and there were more on the way. I think those might fall by the wayside now, because there's a constituency in this country of the leftists that really believe that American foreign policy, we're supposed to care a lot about the plight of the Palestinians, even at the expense of U.S. interests in the broader region. And we're not supposed to favor the interests of Israel, which is an allied and important state in the region. They really believe that. I mean, the left in this country thinks that we should really make that you and I are supposed to care about what's happening in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. I don't care. I mean, I care as much as I do about any other place in the world. I hope people are safe and fed and happy and everything's fine, but I'm not about to make it the centerpiece of the U.S. government's attention in a region of hundreds of millions of people that has seen more than its fair share of violence and war in recent years, and that we just want things to calm down, and we don't want to send our men and women over there anymore in uniform fighting. We don't want to do that anymore. And I think you're going to see a real struggle ahead here in this possible Biden administration. I think you're going to see a real struggle where everyone on the right is going to be saying, hold on a second, we're not doing this interventionist, peacekeeping, rebuilding other countries thing. It was a bad idea when Bush pushed it, and it was a bad idea when Obama pushed it. Trump didn't fall for that. We're not doing that again. And the left, because, the Democrats, because they'll be in charge under Biden administration, will all of a sudden forget all about their anti-war side. We'll forget all about, Bush lied, babies died, and they'll be pushing for the exertion of U.S. military power on behalf of the internationalist, globalist consensus. And I'm going to fight that tooth and nail, because I'm telling you this right now. I'm not going back over there for the CIA, and I'm not sending a future Buck Jr. or Buckette. That's not a good name. Sounds like a thing you fill with water. Little, I don't know, Mark, come up with a feeble. Little Sarah, I don't know, just came up with a name. I'm not sending my kids over to the Middle East to fight in a war in 20 years because of the globalists. I'm not doing it.